The late summer air shimmered with heat, the kind that made the lake look like glass and the sky stretch endlessly above. I had just finished mowing the yard and was setting up the grill on my deck, looking forward to a quiet evening. The soft sound of waves against the dock was my favorite background music. Peaceful, predictable. Then my phone buzzed. "Hi, Jason," came a voice that immediately made my shoulders tense. It was Karen. Every HOA has a Karen, but ours was truly the gold standard, president of the board, self-appointed rule enforcer, and professional meddler in everyone's business. "Hey, Karen," I said cautiously, already bracing for whatever she wanted. "I just wanted to let you know," she began. In that syrupy tone she used before saying something outrageous. "We're having my daughter's engagement party this evening. We'll be setting up down by the lake. So if you could go ahead and open your gate, that would be perfect." I frowned, glancing out toward my gate, a sturdy, black iron one that separated my private backyard from the shared access road. I repeated, "For what?" "Oh, she said, as if it were obvious, "for my guests. We'll have about 50 people, and I figured it'd be much nicer if they could enjoy the lakefront view from your side. The other dock is kind of muddy, and besides, everyone knows your property has the best sunset spot." I blinked, thinking I must have misheard. "Karen, that's my yard, my private yard." "Well, yes, technically," she said breezily, "but it's all the same lake. We all pay HOA dues, and the lake's for everyone. I already told people they could park along your fence and just walk through your gate. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I echoed, a disbelieving laugh escaping before I could stop it. 50 people tromping through my grass isn't a big deal. "Oh, Jason, don't be dramatic. We'll clean up afterward." "You mean you will clean up?" I asked pointedly. There was a pause. "Well, my guests," she said slowly, as if that somehow made it better. "Look, it's just a few hours. I even invited the whole HOA board, so it'll be great exposure for you if you ever decide to sell. You'll thank me later?" I rubbed my temple. Karen had a way of speaking that made lunacy sound like logic. "Karen, no one's using my property for your party. That's not happening." Silence. Then, sharply, "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said. "The community dock is open. You can set up there like everyone else." "But that dock is tiny!" she snapped, the sugary tone evaporating. "There's barely space for 10 people, let alone 50. My daughter's fiancé's family is coming from out of town. They can't be expected to sit in mud and mosquitoes while the lakefront view goes to waste right next door." "That's not my problem," I said. "And you didn't even ask before promising people access. You're being incredibly selfish," she hissed. "This is a community, Jason. We're supposed to share." I looked out the window again and saw something that made my jaw drop. Down the road, cars were already pulling up. SUVs, sedans, even a little white van. People were stepping out in dresses and polo shirts, carrying coolers and folding chairs. They were heading straight toward my gate. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. "I told them they could start setting up," Karen said smugly. "Don't make this difficult." That was the moment I decided I wasn't dealing with this insanity any longer. I ended the call mid-sentence, walked out to my gate, and locked it tight. The latch clicked with a satisfying finality. A few minutes later, I heard the unmistakable clack of Karen's heels on the pavement. She appeared at the end of my drive, wearing a wide pink sun hat, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard like she was hosting a wedding rather than crashing a lake house. "Jason," she called, striding up to the gate. "Let's be reasonable here." Reasonable would have been asking before inviting 50 people to my property, I said. "They're not on your property yet," she said with a smirk, grabbing the gate handle and giving it a tug. "But they will be once you open this. Come on, don't be petty." The gate didn't budge. She yanked harder. "Seriously, are you locking me out?" I raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm locking you out." Her face flushed red. "This is outrageous!" "You can't just claim part of the lakefront for yourself. You think because you bought a house here you own the view." "I literally own this land," I said flatly. "Check the property map if you're confused." "Oh, I'll do more than that," she snapped. "I'll bring this up at the next HOA meeting. You can't deny residents lake access." "You mean access to my yard?" She ignored that. Behind her, a few guests were arriving, looking around awkwardly as they realized there was no open gate, no tables, and definitely no welcoming host. A man in a suit approached Karen. "Karen," he said hesitantly, "is this the right place?" "Yes, yes," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "There's just been a minor misunderstanding. Jason's being difficult." but we'll get it sorted out. She turned back to me, lowering her sunglasses to glare. You can't embarrass me like this. I'm not the one who invited 50 people to a stranger's yard, I said, crossing my arms. Karen's nostrils flared. Stranger. We're neighbors. That doesn't mean you can throw a party here. Oh, for heaven's sake! She snapped, and then, unbelievably, started yelling to the gathering crowd. Everyone, just come on in! He'll open it in a minute. Then she tried to climb the gate. I wish I were exaggerating. She actually lifted one foot onto the lower bar, clutching her clipboard with one hand and the iron rail with the other. Her hat tilted sideways and her sunglasses nearly fell off. I just stood there, staring in disbelief as she tried to haul herself over. Karen, I said slowly, if you don't get down from there, I'm calling the cops. She froze halfway up. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and held it up so she could see the little red circle blinking. Her eyes widened. For a second, she looked like she was calculating whether to keep going or back down. Then, muttering under her breath, she dropped back onto the pavement, brushing off her skirt. This isn't over, she said darkly. You can't just lock out the HOA president. Funny, I said I just did. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She spun on her heel, storming off toward her confused guests, who were starting to whisper among themselves. I could hear her hissing excuses, something about how I was violating community unity, or some such nonsense. I stayed where I was, leaning against the fence, still recording. The sun was starting to dip, throwing gold light across the water, and all I could think was how surreal it felt, standing guard over my own property from a woman who thought rules didn't apply to her. Karen stomped back one last time, pointing a manicured finger at me. You'll regret this, Jason, she said. You'll see. I met her glare calmly. Maybe. But at least I'll have my peace and quiet tonight. She huffed, spun around again, and disappeared into the cluster of cars. As engines started revving and guests began muttering about finding another place, I took a deep breath and stopped the recording. The gate stayed locked, the yard stayed empty, and the lake, finally, was still again, for the moment anyway, because if I knew Karen, this wasn't the last I'd hear of it. By the time the police cruiser turned down the gravel road toward my property, the golden light of evening had begun to fade into a deep orange glow over the lake. From where I stood near the gate, I could see the reflection of flashing lights glimmering across the still water. The low hum of conversation on the other side of the fence had turned into irritated murmurs. Karen's grand party guests were growing restless. They'd been standing there for nearly 20 minutes, some leaning against cars, others fanning themselves with paper plates and invitations. A few had even started opening coolers, trying to salvage the mood with drinks. Karen was pacing like a restless general, muttering orders to anyone who'd listen, her pink sun hat bobbing through the crowd like a warning buoy. I'd called the non-emergency line after she tried to scale my gate, explaining that a group of people was trespassing and refusing to leave private property. The dispatcher had been calm but firm. Stay on your property, sir. We'll send someone out. Now that someone had arrived, the cruiser rolled to a stop beside the curb, its headlights cutting through the small crowd. The driver's door opened and a tall officer stepped out, adjusting his sunglasses even though the sun was nearly gone. He had that calm, practiced demeanor of someone who'd seen this kind of neighborhood drama 1,000 times before. Evening, he said, looking between me and the crowd. Who's Jason? That would be me, I said, raising a hand. Before I could say more, Karen swooped in like a storm. Officer, she exclaimed, as if greeting an old friend she hadn't seen in years. Thank goodness you're here. This man, she jabbed a finger toward me, is denying HOA members access to the lake. He's locking us out and breaking community rules. The officer gave her a polite nod. All right, ma'am, we'll get this sorted out. Then he turned to me. Sir, you want to tell me your side? I kept my tone even. Sure. This is my property, my deed, my fence, my dock. The HOA doesn't have easement rights here. They have their own community dock on the other side of the lake. I told her she couldn't bring 50 guests through my yard, and she decided to come anyway. Karen scoffed. He's exaggerating. It's a community lake. We all pay dues for maintenance. He can't just fence off access for himself. Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady. The lake shared. Yes, but the land around it isn't. This is mine. Karen crossed her arms. You can say whatever you want, but the HOA rules clearly state that all residents have equal access to common areas, and this, she waved dramatically at the gate, is part of that. The officer raised a brow. Do you have paperwork to show that? Karen hesitated. Well, not on me. But everyone knows it's true. Ha! The officer said, unimpressed. He turned to me. You got documentation? Of course. I handed him a folder I'd grabbed earlier, my property deed, the HOA map, and a printed email from the HOA management company confirming that my land was privately owned, not part of any shared common area. The officer took his time flipping through the papers, nodding slowly. All right, looks pretty clear to me. He looked back at Karen. Mom, this is his property. You and your guests need to move to the community dock. Karen's eyes widened. What? You can't be serious. Officer, my daughter's engagement party is tonight. We've got food tables, a catering truck coming any minute. This man is ruining everything. I'm not ruining anything, I said calmly. You're just not using my yard for it. The officer's voice remained polite but firm. Mom, I understand you're upset, but you can't host an event on someone else's property without their permission. I'm asking you and your guests to clear out. Karen's expression hardened. Do you know who I am? She asked, her voice low and trembling with outrage. The officer didn't even flinch. No, ma'am. And it wouldn't make a difference if I did. There was a collective murmur from the crowd. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing they'd just gone to a restaurant instead. One woman whispered something to her husband, who nodded and started packing up a cooler. Karen's daughter, a young woman in a white sundress, finally stepped forward. Mom, maybe we should just move it, she said quietly. This is getting embarrassing. Embarrassing. Karen snapped. What's embarrassing is watching your own mother be bullied off community land. Mum, the daughter said, a bit firmer now. This isn't community land. You're literally trespassing. That earned a few nervous chuckles from the onlookers. The officer tried to hide a smirk. Karen turned bright red. I cannot believe this, she hissed. 50 people, ruined plans and all because of you? She pointed at me again. Mom, the officer interjected. I'm going to need you to stop pointing at people and start gathering your guests. If you refuse to leave, I'll have to file a report for trespassing. Her mouth fell open. Trespassing. I'm the HOA president! Which means you should know better, he replied evenly. That did it. Karen stood frozen for a long moment, breathing hard, clutching her clipboard like it was a lifeline. Then, with a sharp flick of her wrist, she turned on her heel and shouted, Everyone back to your cars! We'll take this to the proper authorities. Her guests didn't need convincing. They started piling into vehicles, murmuring apologies to me as they went. Some even waved sheepishly. Within minutes, the road was clearing, the sound of car doors slamming echoing through the cooling air. Karen lingered, glaring at me through the bars of the gate as the officer began walking back toward his cruiser. You think you've won, Jason, she said, her voice tight. This isn't over. I'll see you at the next HOA meeting. You'll regret humiliating me? Karen, I said, unlocking the gate just enough to lean on it. I didn't humiliate you. You did that all on your own. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a second, I thought she might throw her clipboard at me. Instead, she stomped off toward her car, slamming the door so hard the sound echoed across the water. Gravel kicked up behind her tires as she sped off, leaving a cloud of dust in her wake. The officer gave me a look that was half amusement, half exhaustion. You handled that pretty well, he said. Most people would have lost their cool a lot sooner. Trust me, I said. I came close. He chuckled. Next time she shows up with 50 friends, just call us right away. Don't argue. You've got the documentation, that's all that matters. I'll remember that, I said. He nodded, climbed back into his cruiser and drove off, the last flicker of red and blue lights fading into the night. When silence finally settled, I turned back to the lake. The surface was perfectly calm again, untouched and silver in the moonlight. The faint scent of barbecue still lingered from the grill, which I'd forgotten about in all the chaos. I smiled to myself, shaking my head. Somewhere across the lake, faintly, I could hear Karen yelling into her phone, probably to the rest of the HOA board, her voice carrying just far enough to make me laugh. I poured myself a drink, leaned back in my chair, and watched the water catch the last colors of the sunset. Peace at last. For the moment, anyway. I had no doubt Karen would bring it up at the next OA meeting, complete with printouts and wild accusations. But as far as I was concerned, I'd done everything by the book. My gate was locked, my rights were clear, and my lakefront was once again mine. And no matter what Karen tried next, she'd think twice before ever calling 50 guests to my property again.